What's up, everybody? This is Josh from Free Indeed, the channel where we talk about what a Christ-centered biblical recovery process looks like. And in today's video, we are going to talk about following instructions, and we are going to look at how following instructions from God, Scripture, and other people that we can trust can be a really useful and almost the most important thing that we can do when we are working on our recovery. So the first thing we're going to do is go to our anchor verse for this video, and it's Proverbs 23:12 on page 811, and it says this: "Commit yourselves to instruction, listen carefully to words of knowledge." And that word yourself, where it says commit yourself to instruction, that word is leb. It is the Hebrew word for heart. So that's the inner, and the heart meaning like the center of who you are. So this says commit your heart to instruction. That means not yourself to. That means not. It means committing your heart to listening to what other people and God and Scripture have to say more than yourself. Because my thinking, listening to advice from unhealthy people and believing in the lies of Satan is what got me into trouble in the first place. Because I thought I had all the answers. I thought I was right. I thought everybody else was wrong. And I thought all those people that were bad in my life were the ones that were going to help me get better, which is a complete lie, and it's what Satan wants us to believe. So I chose to hide my substance abuse. I chose to lie about it. I chose to isolate when those times of when I really should have been reaching out for help. So what happened to change my life for the better? Well, one of the main things is I started following instructions from healthy people that knew what was best for me. That's really important to realize, is that there are people in your life that God puts there that know what's best for you, but it's my responsibility to listen to them and to do what they say. That's the hard part. The listening part, the hearing part is the easy part. We can hear people all day, but it's if we're really listening, we're actually doing what they tell us to do. That's when we can see true change in my life. So when I started following instructions from these healthy people, I started studying the Bible, which meant applying biblical principles to my life, not just reading it. And I started listening to God in prayer. So that was one of the things that I was told to do. It's one of the things that I learned from Soul Care, the book by Rob Reimer, is that He wants to tell us a lot of things in prayer, but we have to be the ones to I have to be the one that go to prayer and ask God for instructions, for wisdom, for guidance, for a light to my path. And then I have to listen. That's the other part of it. It's not just the saying it, it's the receiving part of it. And those are things that the receiving is really what we're talking about today. The receiving and the application of the reception. So regarding boundaries, the way this works is all the instructions that I received and all the application that I started to apply started pushing what was bad out of my life and started protecting and cultivating and nourishing what was good in my life. Because what we have learned already is that boundaries keep the bad out and the good in. And following instructions from healthy people, the Bible, and God is what develops those boundaries to keep the bad out. So one of the books that I studied and continue to study is Proverbs, specifically Proverbs 4:23 and Proverbs 8:34, which we have videos for, and I'll post a link for those videos in the description. And Proverbs is known as one of the wisdom books in the Bible, one of three: Job, Ecclesiastes, and Proverbs. One theme throughout Proverbs is that listening to the wise and following their instructions leads to wisdom, provision, safety, and what we would call restoration and recovery. So basically, if you want things to get better, follow the instructions of Proverbs. Proverbs is full of all kinds of stuff that you can follow and do. I know this is a lot easier said than done, but we can learn the tools and develop some questions to ask ourselves what will make progress towards a changed life of recovery. So the next thing that we're going to talk about Proverbs specifically is reading it in context. Reading it in context is so important. Knowing the who is speaking or who is speaking to, it often changes the meaning of the text, which we want to know what the Bible really means, not what it means to me. I want to know what Solomon meant when he wrote down these words, who he was talking to, what he was talking about, where he was talking, who was receiving it. All those kinds of things are what have to do with context. So that's one thing that we're going to talk about in our application here in just a minute. One way to look at this idea of wisdom and following instructions is like a tree. So if wisdom is the fruit that I want, then the only way I can get it is to have the tree, or the seed for some of us, watered so that it may grow in order to mature. But in order for the tree to grow and bear fruit, it requires both water, the noun, and to be watered, the verb. So you have to actually have the source, which is the actual water itself, and the act of watering, which is the the pouring out and the reception of. There is the resource itself, the water, and there's the release and the absorption of the resource, what we just said. A tree also is not able to water itself. That's where we get into this area of my thinking got me into trouble. So I need to realize that I was watering my own seed, and that does not produce good fruit. It requires an outside source. Just like a tree requires like a hose or a lake or a stream or somebody actually going and watering, we can look at the same way with our own tree of wisdom. So watering and consequential growth is not a one-time event. This is a process. It's a repeated process over time that needs to be done with regularity in order to avoid decay, malnutrition, or even death. When it comes to the tree of fruit of wisdom in my life, it's my responsibility to get it watered, and yet I'm unable to water it myself. So where can I find resources of water for my tree? And again, that I will say this, that one source of water for your tree needs to be some form of Jesus. That's the only water that we need. However, there's a lot of different places that we can get that resource from, whether it be the Bible, other people, or God. I'm going to leave a link in, I'm going to leave a list in the description of all the verses that I found in Proverbs that talk about receiving instruction, whether it be from God, Solomon, Lady Wisdom, as wisdom is personified in Proverbs, the wise, other people, advisors. And again, there's just a list if you want to do some extra work and go look up those verses. There's a lot of good stuff to dig into there. However, right now we are going to get into the who, what, where, why, when, and how of applying Proverbs to your life when it comes to following instruction. So the first question is, who is speaking, or who is the text referring to? Sometimes it helps to back up a few verses or even to the beginning of the chapter to see who's the one speaking or who's the one speaking to. So if you go to, say, let's go to Proverbs 8. I'll do a real quick example here. I think there's a pretty good example here in Proverbs 8. If you go to Proverbs 8 and look at verse 17, it says, I love all who love me. Those who search will surely find me. Okay, so me, if you just read that verse by itself, you might think that me is God. Well, that's not really true, because in Proverbs 8, me is referring to Lady Wisdom. And Lady Wisdom has a lot of very specific things and attributes about her that apply to our recovery and how that chapter was meant to be understood. So that's just one example of who is speaking or who's the text referring to. The next one is, what is the application? Listening, watching, waiting, doing, going, not going, avoiding, hiding, confronting, giving, receiving, guarding, protecting. There's a million different things you can apply in your life from Proverbs. And there's a really cool thing that I've learned from Rick Warren's book on Bible study. I think I've got it right over here somewhere. This is a really cool book that I've worked through a couple of times. It's Rick Warren's Bible study methods. And in every chapter, he goes through the 4 P's of biblical application. And the 4 P's of biblical application are personal, practical, possible, and provable. So whenever you're learning how to apply these different applications from Proverbs, go through those 4 P's and see if you can answer if it's personal, if it's practical, if it's possible, and if it's provable, and then start working those things into your life, into different situations and relationships. The next thing is, how can the text be put into a prayer? There's a million different ways you can pray scripture. If you want to start somewhere, go to Psalm 119. Psalm 119 is written in the first person, and you can start praying that every day. It's pretty long, but you know what? If you start doing that, you'll start maintaining your connection to biblical application and scripture. The next one is, who are the people you should be listening to? And the second question, so we could do a 3.1 question or 3.A question, is, why are you not? There's going to be people in your life that you need to be listening to. One of mine is my sponsor. Another one is my pastor. Another one is my dad, God, the Bible. So who, because the Bible is a living, breathing, this is where God reveals himself. So I consider this a person. This is a place where I can meet Jesus and God. So who are you listening to? And if you're not listening to the right people, why not? Fifth question is, when will you make time to listen to instructions? This isn't going to just randomly happen. You're going to have to make time. The question is, when will you make time to listen to instruction? That can either be in structured prayer time, counseling, going to church, going to recovery group, meeting with a counselor, calling your uncle who's a pastor. I don't know. There's a million different ways you could do this. Reading a proverb a day. I read a proverb a day because there's 31 chapters in Proverbs. So any day of the month, whether it's, so today is February 27th, so I read Proverbs 27 this morning. These are just ways of when will you make time to listen to instructions. And the last question is, where are you writing down the instructions you're receiving? If you're going to try to keep all this stuff in your head, it's going to be pretty difficult to keep that all in line and to remember. But if you write this stuff down, whether it be in a journal, get out your phone. I use my phone apps and my calendar and my alarms a lot. There's a lot of different tools we have in our lives to write it down. When I say write it down, some people are physical writers, and that's great. I'm not personally. I use my computer and my phone to write things down because I'm always looking at those things. And so it helps remind me of what instructions I've been told so that I can follow them, especially when I'm in time of need and I'm going, okay, wait a second, something's wrong here. And I know I have an instruction. I know I'm supposed to be doing something right now, but I got to find it. And if you're relying on your memory, that's going to fail. So we're going to go through these questions one more time before we end this video. It's who is speaking, or what is the text referring to when you're reading the Bible? Second one is, what is the application that you're trying to learn or that you're trying to apply? Number 3, how can the text be put into a prayer when it comes to reading the Bible? Number 4, who are the people you should be listening to and why are you not? Number 5, when will you make time to listen to instructions? And number 6, where are you writing down the instructions you are receiving? If you take these questions, the who, why, where, why, when, and how of this video, you are going to start seeing boundaries developed in your life that just start producing all kinds of fruit, hopefully wisdom, and you're going to start pushing the bad stuff out and keeping the bad stuff in. So I hope this was helpful to you. I will leave a link. I will leave times and locations in the description below for our meetings, and I hope to see you at a meeting sometime. See you later.